He's rebooted his computer because he
Okay.
froze.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So he'll join one.
Okay, so I think we should call to order. It is 7:07. And if we could please have a roll call. Mr. Jeffrey.
Manager Crafton.
Here, present.
Manager DeVell.
Present.
Manager Ziegler.
Present.
Manager Cook, we're waiting on, and President Pedersen.
I'm here. Thank you
Alright,
so much.
we have a quorum.
And we have an agenda, so I'd be looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I'll move the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Manager Crafton and Manager Ziegler. So that brings us to item number 3, the Chanhassen Regional Stormwater Management. And I will turn this over to you.
President Pedersen, managers, tonight we have with us Joe Seidel from the city of Chanhassen, Charles Howley, Public Works Director from the city of Chanhassen.
Do we need to vote on the agenda?
Oh yeah, we
Yes,
should
we
probably vote on the agenda. Yeah.
Yes, we probably should.
Thank you.
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager DeVell,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler.
Yes.
Manager Cook has not joined us yet. President Pedersen.
Yes.
All right.
Excuse
401
me.
Absent. Okay, back
Now,
to it.
we're just excited to move forward.
So tonight we have with us from the city of Chanhassen, Joe Seidel, Water Resources Engineer, Charles Howley, Public Works Director, City Engineer, Ron Leaf from Kimley Horn. I almost blew that one. And Adam Jaden from Kimley Horn as well. As managers here are aware, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been working hard to repair relationships, improve relationships with our cities. We've been working cooperatively with Mr. Howley and Mr. Seidel on a number of different projects throughout the city. They are currently in the process of looking at their overall downtown area and what's going to be changing with that downtown area into the future. Everything from the city campus to Great Plains Boulevard to West 78th Street. As you are all aware, many of our variances come in the form of road projects, linear projects. They're very difficult to find area within the right of way to meet our requirements. So we have been meeting with the city and looking at a more regional design whereby they would use that large pond, and they'll walk through in more detail, use the large pond down by Cub Food to do irrigation of different areas throughout the downtown. They also have some biofiltration features in there. What we really would like for the managers to do is hear the city talk, because they don't want to get so far along in this and find out that the managers wouldn't want to go down this road. But as a staff, both Engineer Sobiak and myself feel that they are moving in the right direction, and we will be needing to do this more and more as we look at road projects if we really want to start protecting the resource we have. I think we'll have a net overall better project by doing something like this rather than trying to piecemeal a few things in where we can in the right of way. So with that, I guess I would like to turn it over to Charles Howley and go from there. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Terry, Madam President, managers. Good evening, and thank you first for having us here for us to introduce our concept and our projects. Thank you for the work that you guys do in protection of the water resources. We value that, and we know you do a lot of good work here. And thank you for having such a great staff. And we work, primarily Joe works with your staff almost daily on many different things, and our relationship is very good. I think we have common goals. We communicate well with each other, and there's not a lot of obstacles in our way. So thank you. We're here to go over our project. My team will do most of the speaking. Again, thank you for allowing us to come in front of you. And we can pause for questions throughout if you want, or you can wait till the end. That's your pleasure if you want to just let us know or interject whenever you will, but we'll just keep going unless we hear from you. And then at the end, we certainly will have a Q&A session. So
Great.
Again, thank you. And I'll pass it on to Ron.
Slide.
So, oh, this is the introduction slide. I guess we went through that. My name again is Ron Leaf with Kimley Horn. I'm gonna quick jump to the agenda then. We'll kind of talk about the details of what we're gonna go over. First, quick background on how we arrived at this point and why we're before you today. We're gonna talk a little bit about the framework that we call for this regional approach and concept, including giving you an idea of what the city has planned for projects in the area, what some of the planned best management practices are, including this regional reuse system that Terry mentioned. We'll talk about the crediting approach, right? If we're going to do a regional system, there has to be some method in order to account for credits that are put into the bank and withdrawn from the bank. So we'll highlight what that looks like. And then talk a little bit about the schedule, the requested action, which Terry touched on, which is just looking for your acceptance and concurrence that this is a good thing for this project area, and then question and answer. Next slide, please. So a little bit of the background, there are a number of projects that.
It's green, it's on, yeah.
Okay. Number of projects in the downtown area that the city has planned in the next 5 years. And as the city started to look at the range of projects and the areas that were available to do best management practices that could meet your abstraction and volume control requirements, those options are limited. Again, Terry touched on that in a linear project setting, which a couple of these projects are, those are great challenges in the linear corridor. Kudos to you and your staff who completed this study in 2017 to kind of set the stage and some ideas for this area. And really, the outcome of this is really kind of building on what you and your staff have already done in this area, primarily the reuse, and then a couple of what we're calling active filters. Market Boulevard, one of the projects, provides a great opportunity to implement and initiate that regional reuse because we have to reconstruct it. So what a great opportunity to put a force main from the regional pond up to where there's some available land for irrigation. Ultimately, the overall goal is not only to meet requirements, but really to provide greater overall water quality benefits through this regional approach than we could achieve on a project by project approach. So a little background on how we arrived here. Also wanted to just kind of frame this section of your Rule J, Section 4, is where the regional approach comes up. We understand that this will be the first project before you taking this regional approach, but I thought it would be helpful to kind of highlight what's in there, just to refresh your memories, is that needs to meet two criteria to get your approval. That would be that a regional facility in place of on-site stormwater management essentially can't result in adverse impacts to any of these resources, right? And so we've been working with your staff, and we're confident that we achieve that we do not result in any adverse impacts. Certainly as we go through the permitting process for projects, the details of that will be defined. And then the second criteria there is that the plan incorporates on-site BMPs where necessary to mitigate impacts and provide local benefits not provided by the regional facility. So you'll hear us talk about 3 of these projects that are the first ones out of the gate that each has planned BMPs in addition to using the regional approach to kind of fill the gap that we can't get with those site-specific, project-specific BMPs. A little bit more on the background. Talked about the framework builds on your study. You completed this study. One of the key components of that was a regional stormwater reuse system. We're just kind of putting a little more detail to that and have done some background work to show that it's feasible and viable. In addition, some of the individual projects that we'll implement in a regional approach. So we don't just have the reuse system as a regional feature. We have a couple of active filters as well. Touched on the Section 4 regional stormwater management rule. Charlie touched on it again, just coordinating with your staff since June, both Terry and Scott, to kind of look at what are the practices, how can we get the most out of it? Had some initial conversations with Scott about some of the technical details of it. We know we have more to do, but we think we're in a good spot here. And then as Charlie touched on again, just the cooperation between the city and the watershed on other projects, just a couple noted there, expanded the pond cleanout program, and then Rice Marsh Lake, the filter BMP. So continuing that history of this cooperative approach. Next slide. I think this is you. Yeah.
So I'll just briefly reintroduce myself. My name's Adam Jaden. I'm an engineer with Gimli Horn. So I'm going to talk briefly about the planned projects here. We have some slides a little bit later to kind of dive into each of these projects a little bit more and explain them. So from a high level, with the image on the screen there on the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the regional existing wet pond that has been mentioned a couple times already, and the graphic also shows the city's public projects that we'll be talking a little bit more about that are intended to be part of this regional plan. So the first one there is the Chanhassen Civic Campus project, kind of in the top right corner there. Additionally, we'll be talking a little bit more about the Chanhassen 2024 Street Rehabilitation Project in the kind of top in the pink there, and then Market Boulevard reconstruction, which is adjacent to the wet pond. And as Ron mentioned, provides an opportunity to really kind of capitalize from the construction standpoint of implementing the regional reuse. As well as a couple of iron enhanced active filtration. I think one thing we would like to highlight, as Ron mentioned, the rule also, that each project will incorporate site specific BMPs, not solely relying on the regional system to account for all of the stormwater management, that each individual project will be doing as much as they can with the, whether it's linear, within the right of way that they can, and then, to kind of satisfy that portion of the rule.
Ask a quick question.
Yes.
Can some of that be vegetated at all? Around that?
Around the pond itself?
Hmm?
It's primarily wooded and shrubs around that pond
Okay,
right
that's why I
now.
wondered
So,
what
yeah.
the
Yeah,
vegetation.
it's not
looked
lawn,
like.
yeah, that's
Okay,
not
perfect,
maintaining lawn
thanks.
around that pond.
I'm concerned about heat island effect, so I'm always looking for ways that we can mitigate, but if it's already got some stuff there, that's good. Thanks. Go ahead.
And next slide, Joe. Or Joe. Okay. So this slide just shows at a high level graphically the regional BMP concept. Again, with the pond being the anchor of the regional BMP. The graphic on the left, the arrows are illustrating the planned areas for reuse irrigation. And those would be at the civic campus, at the ball fields that are the elementary school property, and then throughout the streets, whether it be Market Boulevard, West 78th, trying to incorporate as much reuse irrigation areas as we can. We know of those being part of the study, the areas that have been identified. And then on the right-hand side, we have identified the 2 locations for filtration, biofiltration, active filters to be pumped from the pond for recycling of that water, so it can be continuously treated from that pond.
Thanks, Adam.
Go back to the previous slide once. Where's the pond in the picture?
It's kind of bottom left hand.
This is Highway 5, Great Bend Boulevard right here.
So, and the slide right next to it, you can see it. Like on the slide right next to it to the right, you can see it down there in the bottom.
Yeah,
left
yeah, yeah.
hand.
Okay,
That's it.
okay. Got it. It's the dark purple in the lower left corner, right? Or dark red, whatever it is. So maybe you're going to come to this, but how does this, or are you going to come to it, how this deviates from the existing flow and the existing stormwater? Are you going to talk about changes to the existing system versus, I mean, to where we're going versus to where it was? Does that make any sense?
So as President Pedersen, Manager Development, I think as we get more into the design, then we will be looking more specifically at changes within stormwater routing. As they already mentioned, though, that second provision within the Rule J regional is so you can't increase rates, for instance, at a place where you aren't putting in, so you'd still have to address that at that time. The rerouting, though, is generally going to come more in the design phase, and they haven't laid out the storm sewer, for instance, at this point now.
Okay. And I guess one more question. Can you define what a regional BMP is versus very specific?
I can jump in there. Madam Pedersen and Manager Duval. I guess I want to first take a crack at the first question you had. Generally speaking, we're not really changing where the water's going, right? So it's all the water today is conveyed to that larger pond that's on the corner of Highway 5 and it's actually Marketplace Boulevard. So that's not really the plan to change that. The regional BMP approach is actually using irrigation and active filtration at that location to enhance how that BMP would operate. So right now, that BMP is a wet pond, which has limited abilities to treat stormwater, and we want to do more with that. So again, there's not really, there will be changes to routing as we build storm sewer and other systems, but generally speaking, we're all collecting and conveying water to the same locations. And so we're not really changing those existing drainage patterns. Going into what the regional approach means here, a regional approach is just saying that we're actually treating water from a large area instead of having individual BMPs at those individual sites. This is kind of a unique situation where because all that water is actually going to this common space BMP already, it's an opportunity for us to do more at that location and save on things like maintenance because it's much easier to maintain one large BMP than it is a lot of smaller BMPs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I guess with that, I'm Joe Seidel. I'm the Water Resources Engineer at the City of Chanhassen. It's actually my turn for slides here. So I'll move on to the next one. So jumping into the Civic Campus rebuild, I'm going to give just a little bit of background here, and Charlie can probably give a lot more than me because he's in those meetings where they're actually going over the design of the Civic Campus. But essentially, the City of Chanhassen has outgrown our current building that we're in. It's a little bit dated, would be a kind way of saying it, but we're looking at rebuilding that on site. So that the buildings actually, they're going to be a brand new building. It's going to shift. If you were looking at our current city hall, there is an area where the flagpoles are in the Veteran Memorial on the southeast corner of the site. That's where the new building is going to go. So phase one would be that they're going to build that new building. And then phase two is they're going to demo our old building. And then they're building, a park space there. And then they're adding, an area for Chanhassen Chanhassen residents and staff to gather. It's a really cool opportunity because we get to set standards for what Chanhassen wants our downtown area to be like. And we really want this to be, you know, a center of government and just, you know, people enjoying the area. So they're looking at, you know, having picnic tables and you know, other forums for music and things like that, to be able to gather and use that space. That being said, there's actually a lot that's going into the site sustainability. So, you know, we are looking at preservation of the existing trees on site to the maximum extent. We're looking at the landscaping plans and incorporating, you know, pollinator-friendly native plantings. The site is being designed to minimize salt use and increase snow melt. We're actually looking at implementing heated sidewalks in areas in strategic spots. The entire site is looking to achieve a no net increase in impervious area. So from a stormwater, you know, perspective, that's a benefit there. And then we're also looking at incorporating BMPs on site. I think one important thing that I want you to all know is that while we are doing this regional BMP approach, that doesn't mean that we're not going to try to incorporate BMPs where they make sense with those individual projects. Again, this is an opportunity for us to just do more with that regional approach concept. One thing that I am particularly excited about is that there's an opportunity on site, especially with the civic campus rebuild and that being a gathering spot for educational opportunities. I personally see education and teaching people about what stormwater means and just good practices as it relates to stormwater and the environment is, you know, something that we can pass on and do a lot with. In our initial discussions with both the civic campus and this regional BMP, we are looking at essentially a foot tour. So we're looking at having signage that ties in our civic campus to the regional BMP. So what that would mean would say, you know, there'd be a walking tour and you could walk around and say, well, here's the civic campus area, here's the BMPs on site, here's where the irrigation is happening. And then you could maybe walk down Market Boulevard and there would be a sign and say, you know, 10 feet under the ground here, there's a force main that is taking water and being used for that irrigation. And then you could walk down to that regional BMP, the actual wet basin, you know, and say, well, this is where the water's coming from. So I think there's a really special opportunity there. Could you get the next slide, please? And with that, I'll turn that over to Mr. Howley.
So Terry, that's the same building we used to meet in when you worked for Jan, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man, this is exciting.
Wow.
I just think,
So that building,
Wow.
President Pedersen and managers, Joe was very kind. It reminds me of somebody who bought a cabin and then continued to add on room after room after room. The HVAC system never works properly because it's zoned wrong. So, yeah, it's kind of long overdue for that.
well, Bloomington redid their civic area and I mean, the multiple benefits of this just seem really exciting
Great.
to see come to some plan. Great, thanks.
Yeah, Madam President and board managers. So Joe went over the site. Now the building itself, we wanted to at least touch on, which this doesn't have a real tie to the regional BMP and the permitting requirements and all of that. This is just another story to tell about sustainability in general. In the building itself, we've got a pretty strong team, a very experienced design architect who does energy efficient, sustainable buildings all over the place at BKV. And so we could talk through all of these. They're very exciting. These primarily are not options that we're going to consider, like these are built into the project, right? So we've participated with Xcel Energy in the Design Energy Assistance Program, in which they review the mechanical components, and they say, well, you could do better here, consider that. And we get some credits back for picking the more efficient stuff. So we've gone through that program to kind of scope out the HVAC systems in the building. We're designing for solar ready on the building, which means at some point in the future, and it's likely not an if, but a when, we can put some solar panels on the roof, and then it's tied right in and ready to go. We don't have to like spend a bunch of money to retrofit it. That's fairly exciting. And you may or may not know that Xcel Energy has a lot of like solar farms that municipalities buy into. And by doing that, you get some credits on your energy bills. Well, Xcel Energy is in front of the PUC right now, trying to limit or lower the amount of credits we get, which essentially means, well, we wouldn't have signed up for this program because we're not getting the benefits we thought. So rather than building solar panels, we buy into the program. Well, if the program changes, we might have to then reinvest into the solar panels. So it's unfortunate, the request that Xcel Energy has right now, but it's timely in the design of our new building.
This should help you as a Green Stuff City.
Yes,
If you
yes,
get
certainly
points.
we should get lots of points on this project for that program. Again, interior, LED and everything dims and turns off when you're in and out of the room. So we're trying to be as energy efficient there. Low flow plumbing, that sort of stuff. A lot of daylight. There's a lot of glass on the building, so we don't have to use as much energy. And plus that wellness and tying to nature, low VOC finishes. Preference for regional source materials, salvaging materials on site and reusing them. A lot of that stuff, which I'm sure you've heard like LEED design. So we're not getting or going after LEED design, but we're incorporating a lot of what goes into it anyways. We're just not going to get certified as it, because you can do the same things. You just don't have to pay the money to get certified, right? So there's a lot of neat things happening in the building itself beyond just the site.
Madam President?
Next slide. Yep.
Yeah, so I'd like to go over briefly the 2024 street rehabilitation project in this area and has it ties into the regional BMP. So essentially, there's a need for the section of streets that is just east of the city hall for a full reconstruction. So essentially, that's part of our pavement management. And then also acid management it ties into our utilities. Basically, those streets are long past their service life. They're in rough shape. So they are slated for full reconstruction. So we're digging into the native soils. We are fully upgrading our utilities in that area. So that's like our water main, our sanitary, and our storm sewer. From a water resources perspective, this is a really challenging area. So this area was originally developed in the 1960s. In the 1960s, they had pretty limited rules on how to manage stormwater. So when we go and we trigger all the rules with this reconstruction project, there was no space to put stormwater. So we've got to be really clever about how we want to manage that, which is one of the reasons why we're looking into doing this regional treatment approach. Today there's essentially no stormwater. There's no stormwater treatment, and the soils in Chanhassen are predominantly clay. So it's a huge challenge for us. That being said, along with the regional treatment approach, we are looking at implementing a rain garden partnership program with our residents. Actually, could I have you move on to the next slide, please? I would like to give a little bit of credit to Mr. Jeffrey. I didn't come up with this idea. I was looking back at some of our older projects to see what was done in some of these challenging sites, and I saw a rain garden initiative that the city of Chanhassen did, led by Mr. Jeffries in 2012. And I said, why aren't we doing that again? And I asked my boss, Charlie, if we could do that. And so here we are. Essentially what the program is doing is we're looking at working with residents to form partnerships to build with the street project to build a rain garden on site. There's an understanding that not all residents might build a rain garden just because it's the right thing to do or just because it would treat stormwater. So we are looking at the offsetting of their assessment and offsetting stormwater fees that we charge quarterly as an incentive for them to buy into the program. But how this would work is, again, we would build the rain garden as part of the project. We worked with Kimley Horn and Adam to design where some of those locations would be. And then we would partner with the residents who would be taking over the landscaping maintenance of that practice. But through that initiative, we think we can treat a lot of stormwater on site there and maximize the area with the restrictions of the limited right of way there. The other thing I wanted to highlight is that there's some developments that might be occurring in that area, and Chanhassen is actively working with those developers to try to acquire property or try to do shared stormwater opportunities to try to treat stormwater in this area. So in doing so, we're really are trying to maximize the amount of treatment that we're getting. And with that,
So you kind of build it and then they can use,
excuse me?
oh, you're trying to lay out the system and then developers can come into something you've already prepared in a sense.
That would be one of the benefits of the regional approach. I mean, I may be getting a little bit ahead of myself there, but the overall goal would be that we would have credits, and the city's primary concerns are our own projects, right? But if I think what you're alluding to is there might be a situation if there's excess credits and there's other developments going on in the area, then maybe they could buy into that regional BMP approach. That's something that we'd have to navigate with the district's engineer as we go through the accounting of credits.
Madam President, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Well, so may I say something?
Yes, of course.
So I have a couple of things before you go any further. I think there's, I won't go into the discussion of, when, if not necessarily the, public campus, should be built, but there's a couple of things stood out for me. As you said before, there's a line item of potential solar. I don't understand why we wouldn't be doing solar right from the get-go. The problem with solar farms is that it has undetermined effects on land and real estate, and I don't understand why we wouldn't be covering a roof, at least as large as it seems to going to be, with solar panels to reduce our own footprint, the city's footprint. The other thing I didn't see, maybe I missed it, but I didn't see any mention of geothermal. And I think this is an opportunity that is way too often missed. And I believe the Eden Prairie High School installed geothermal. And, I'm a firm believer that we should be exploring geothermal and in building a building, and especially if you're going to do street renovations in the area, it provides an opportunity at some significantly reduced cost to put in geothermal that at least would be available for that particular campus. So it would seem to me it would behoove the city and it would behoove us to highly recommend that you look into these energy conservation, because I know several managers talk about the issue of climate change. Well, climate change is a matter of, throwing, the wrong kind of gases, et cetera, into the air. And so the more we can reduce that usage of, fossil fuels, the better. And I don't think we should be relying on solar farms when you have such a large roof. And also, as I already said, I mean, geothermal is a significant, results in a significant reduction in having to use, fossil fuels, greenhouse gases, and as a good supplement for solar. And that, I think, should definitely be looked into. So, I mean, based on that, what I didn't get, and I'm sorry I had joined a little late here. Are you still just focusing on using that? I guess it's called RM. What pond it is that you're using? Are you still focusing on just that pond as being the regional water, or do you have other more concrete plans of a second or an expanded regional rainwater facility?
Madam President, board managers, Manager Cook. So a lot to unpack there. I will say that we did investigate geothermal, and that I was really looking forward to implementing geothermal if it makes sense. And our design team and our contractor researched it, and it just wasn't, it was feasible to do, of course, but not cost effective to do. And the goals of the Civic Campus project, I mean, number one, the city council established a budget for the project, and geothermal would not fit in that budget. There's not a payback where it kind of works out. So I was a fan of looking into it, and we did look into it, but it was kind of turned away. The solar, we're still not, we're not saying we're not doing it. As I mentioned earlier, we would like to do it. Right now, it wouldn't fit in the project budget. But I tell you, if this thing at the PUC goes the wrong way, it would become more of a reality than not. I think that would turn the scales. However, we still would have to do it at some point in the future because the project budget can't support it. But it may come a lot sooner than it would have otherwise. And then lastly, maybe the other guys can talk, but right now, the source of the water for the regional system is this wet pond. It doesn't mean there couldn't be other sources, but right now, that's what we're looking at, is that pond, which all the analysis says there's lots of water there. So there's not a big risk of not having enough water, but if this concept comes to fruition and is implemented, it doesn't mean we wouldn't use it somewhere else as well, right? So this is a good idea that we think should and could work out. And yeah, if there's other sources of water, we can certainly look into that.
Madam President, if I could just continue, just a couple comments here.
Sure.
Well, it was my understanding that for a while there was the concern that the pond was not big enough to handle the water with the increased, anticipated increase in rain events. And that's where I was going with this, I mean, sucking some water out for irrigation. I mean, that's good if that's what you're going to do. But it was my understanding that there was a concern expressed at one time at one of our meetings about the adequacy of this pond to deal with future, rain events, and particularly the ability to, as you said, treat that. So that's where I was going with that question. Has something changed or did I misinterpret the information that, this pond is actually large enough to cover everything in the future? Or
Check it. I knew you probably said it on the short side.
Can you mute them?
Thank you, Amy.
Madam President, members of the board, Member Cook, I think I can try to answer that again. Ron Leaf with Kimley Horn. I'm not aware of Pond RM5 not having capacity for larger events. But I will say that as we look at the capacity of that pond as a source of irrigation water, our initial estimates show that, we may draw it down a foot or two in a typical year based on average irrigation rates. Certainly we need to kind of run the detailed numbers when we go through that process. If it can accommodate more withdrawal for irrigation purposes, the city has indicated their willingness to excavate that out further, right? It's accumulated sediment over time. So if we need more depth in that pond that's available for irrigation, that's certainly part of the more detailed analysis we will go through. I think the other aspect of this that I'll offer is if that pond does have limited capacity for a given rainfall event, if that's the question about extent of bounce during an extreme event, what we're doing in the peak summertime period is drawing it down, which means that that water level would be a foot or more below the outlet invert, which provides you with additional capacity to handle those larger events. So it's kind of a win-win in that aspect too.
Well, if I just continue briefly, I'd be very interested in having our engineers, look at the assumptions with respect to, the pond, the rain events, et cetera, in this connection, because obviously our challenge is to make sure that we don't have any unnecessary erosion or unnecessary downstream, water flow, contrary to what our rules are. So be interesting to have our engineers chime in on that. And I'd also be interested, and I don't know if you can put somebody in contact with me to see the information regarding the geothermal as well as the solar. I find it very, if the only limitation is budget, I'd be curious on the payback, calculations, and how they would compare to the calculations that the Edenbury High School did. So if you have somebody can reach out and provide me with access to that information, I would appreciate it. And I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Market Boulevard. So beyond Civic Campus and our 24th Street reconstruction project, we've got Market Boulevard up for reconstruction, and that's in 2025. That would be from Highway 5 all the way up to West 78th Street, including the intersection of West 78th Street. So that is the impetus for this whole regional reuse project to occur, because we're doing work right where it needs to happen. So that project's goals, similar to this year's street project, is we've got utilities, we've got pavement, we've got assets that need rehabbing, and reconstruction is the appropriate tool. But we also have other goals with Market Boulevard. The Civic Campus is invigorating and revitalizing and giving a new purpose to downtown Chanhassen. It's a major priority for the City Council. We are currently going through some downtown design guideline updates. And so Market Boulevard will be constructed under these new guidelines. So think of more aesthetic treatments, building placements, things like that. But another focus of that is pedestrian access, getting higher density in downtown, getting people to get from commercial areas to shopping areas to restaurants to their apartments without having to drive around, right? So Market Boulevard is a key cog in all of that. So making it more ped friendly and less vehicle friendly, for lack of better words, is a subtle goal of the Market Boulevard project. And then on this map, you can see where these active filters may be on the east side of the corridor. There may be another location that might come up as well. And we're going to work through it in the final design. I think one of the strategies we've used is Kimley Horn as the design consultant is both the design consultant for Market Boulevard, the regional reuse system, and our 24 reconstruction project. So we got the right people on the team. We don't have to re-educate new engineers and things. So I think that's a strong component of all of this.
Well, Mr. President, Madam President, I'm sorry to have it
Yes.
die hard.
Yes,
Uh,
Mr.
I appreciate you saying about having the same engineer and not retraining, but the old saying, more heads are better than one. And I am a firm believer that it's good to have input from other sources so that you end up with the best possible project. It's not a knock on the existing engineer or whoever you're going to use it, but again, I think the old adage is it's applicable here, especially getting more input, more ideas about what can be done. And I'll just add that I've lived in Chanhassen here since 1990. I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen a lot of mistakes in that city development. Huge number of mistakes. It's going to take a long time to fix those mistakes if they're fixable. And I'm not sure that Market Boulevard is the fix. And so I would encourage you and the city to get as many heads involved as possible to end up with the best possible, hopefully 100-year with a 100-year goal of eventually making Chanhassen better. I mean, we were lucky that at least it was a city, unlike Eden Prairie, but I am not against paying money for getting the best of the best in ideas. So I'm finished. Thank you.
Madam President and board members. Next, I'm going to talk a bit here about the irrigation areas that have been identified as part of this reuse plan and framework.
This is farther north then, right?
That's correct. This is just north of the Civic Campus. The Civic Campus would be just on the southern end of this image. And the ball fields there are part of the Chanhassen Elementary property. So these areas were identified, as Ron alluded to at the beginning of this presentation. The district completed a study in 2017, which was kind of the framework, to use that word again, of this, the vision, right, for how can we do this reuse project, that we're building upon that study and the district's great work from 2017. So just going to talk a little bit about the reuse irrigation areas that we're planning to, the goal is to use these areas. Currently, these areas are irrigated with city water. So to reuse stormwater for irrigation would be a reduction in drinking water, using treated drinking water for irrigation. And I'll just briefly, again, give a kudos to the district and their partnership with us along the way. The district staff went out to these areas, and you can see all the blue markers on the screen here were areas that the district staff completed some soil testing to help us understand the potential for infiltration on the ball fields and help us kind of hone what amount of water we can plan to use for irrigation and the frequency of that in these areas. Next slide. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the credit and accounting of the regional framework. The city has worked closely with the district early and often in developing this framework to understand that we were on the right track and help basically create, three main buckets here that we're tracking in respect to the rules, the stormwater management rules of the district. And that is phosphorus reduction, suspended solids reduction, and volume reduction. So this slide here is just intended to give an idea of a banking approach that this framework is proposing. The numbers and everything are just preliminary calculations that would be finalized as the design for each project progresses. But the concept here is we have identified a number of BMPs that would create credits. And as these projects come along the lines, they would be withdrawing and there would be a accounting of that as part of the regional framework.
Madam President, I'm sorry.
Yes, Manager Cook.
So I have a question. I mean, can I assume that you've collected data on the amount of phosphorus solids, et cetera, that are now coming from these various locations?
Madam
Yes.
President, members of the board, and Member Cook, we have not collected site-specific data on the constituents, these three parameters that are going to the regional pond. We have used standard values that are built into the models we use and that we've talked through with the district engineer. That's why Adam mentioned these are preliminary numbers. We certainly know that as we move through the process, there will be refinement of those numbers, and we continue to have conversations with the district engineer about what assumptions we have in the modeling. We fully intend, as part of the reuse system design, that we will want to get some real data on the water quality within that regional pond so that we have that available for the treatment system design that would feed the irrigated areas. So we haven't yet, but for that specific area, we will need to get that.
Madam President, just a quick follow-up.
Yes.
So one thing I've noticed in the literature, and you may not know, I have a science background, and I keep reading the science literature. Shame on me. But I've noticed that finally, we're finally getting to have the discussions about the impacts of nitrogen and on the various qualities of our water, et cetera. And I don't know why it's taken so long. I mean, the obvious one is down in Louisiana and the Gulf there, the big dead zone because of nitrogen. So my point is, if you haven't, I encourage you to look at if there's anything regarding controlling nitrogen, et cetera, that could be built into your plans here, because almost 25 years ago had this discussion with respect to Lotus Lake. And a lot of our lakes are actually suffering from a nitrogen problem. So if you aren't doing it, I would encourage you to look in to see if that is feasible, to at least look into whether or not it's an issue, and if so, if there's anything that can be done. And I will say, as far as I know, nitrogen is one of the most difficult chemicals to deal with when it comes to water. But then again, I'm no expert. So I'm finished. Thank you.
Next slide, please.
Right.
Okay, 3 to go. We're almost there. Just wanted to revisit this slide that talks about your rule. So we think we've at least given you a preview of how these 3 projects in this approach meets this rule. I won't go over these again, but certainly each project in and of itself has some on-site BMPs, and we need to do a little more work to demonstrate what we already know, in that we won't have any adverse impacts to those other features. So next slide, schedule for these projects. And it comes to a pretty important part of this approach to Civic Campus in the regional BMP concept design, construction planned for summer 2024 through 26. So not too far away, with a permit application you would see sometime in the February, March timeframe. So pretty soon. I think, Charlie, that's still fairly accurate and expected. The 2024 street rehab project, summer 2024. And again, a permit application, maybe a month after that, maybe more like in March. So very soon. And then Market Boulevard and the reuse system, not until summer 2025. So certainly there needs to be some additional design work on that over the course of the next year. So the permit application would follow about a year later, March and April of 25. So what that means is the regional system that we're proposing happens after a couple of the projects that are intending to withdraw credits, right? And what part of the approach proposes is to have some deferred treatment credit, meaning that installation of this regional reuse system happens with Market Boulevard when that opportunity arises through the street recon. And then the credits are withdrawn from in negative balance, and then we refill the bank and see what credits are left over for future projects. This is an approach that we've seen other watersheds have. Ramsey, Washington Metro, Capital Region, for a couple examples, have a provision in their rules which say you can do a regional BMP, provided that regional system is in place within 2 years of the first project that intends to use credits. And I think the other important piece there is, right, that the good news in this area is that regional BMP is still in place today, right? It's a wet pond, so it's not getting the treatment we like to get with our volume control practices today, but it's providing some treatment for those 2 years during the course of implementing those other 2 projects, right? It's there, it's at the bottom of this watershed, and it's doing a good job. So it's a pretty key and important point in what the regional framework proposes, is to defer that true credit banking part of it until 2025, when Market Boulevard reuse system is constructed. Next slide.
All right, Madam President, board managers, our requested action tonight, I mean, we understand this is a workshop. This isn't a formal board meeting where you're going to take a vote. We know that, but time is of the essence, and our action is really to request that we get some initial support, hopefully, as we walk out of here tonight. Support for the concept, not the details. We realize that staff and the design team will be going through lots of iterations of design and QA, and making sure that the design and ultimately the program, the credit banking, meets the intent of the rule, meets the rule, and gets formally adopted at some point in the future at a board meeting. We don't know what board meeting. But as Ron was just alluding to, is we got projects that are shovels are in the ground in May and in June. Projects that rely on this regional system. Now, we have contingency plans in place to just approach this project by project by project and get permitted if we have to. And that's a missed opportunity from our perspective. that there's a better way to do it, right? Looking outside the boundaries of the fence of the property and say, there's an opportunity to do three things as opposed to just looking on your site. And hopefully we can get some support from you tonight. We're not asking for any financial commitment. This is all paid for by City of Chanhassen, you know, funds and other revenue sources that we get for these types of projects. So we just would really like to know your thoughts on the concept, because we need direction on if this is a hard no, which we hope it's not, or yeah, it looks like we might have something here. Please continue to work with staff, and eventually we'll dot the i's and cross the t's and come back for some formal approvals. So with that, I would say thank you, and we're ready for questions.
Thank you. I think we should let each one of you just maybe a couple minutes to say how you feel about the project, and if you have any specific questions, and that way you'll get hear from all of us. Andrew Crafton, you want to start?
Let me start. Okay. Well, one of my first impressions is that you're taking a storm pond or whatever you're calling it, and you're redistributing the benefits. Does that make sense to the different areas too? So for me, that's a plus. I love what you're trying to do with the city in terms of all of, you know, the civic campus and all of that. It just makes total sense to me. I'm trusting that our engineer is going to keep us on track, right? And I know he works hard with you guys to do that. So I have total confidence in that. But I think it's an exciting project. You got my support at this point, and I just think I like your vision and where you're going with it, and all the features you've built into that campus, I think are really important, because it seems like there's some capacity there for infiltration or whatever. So I'm excited.
Manager Ziegler.
Thank you. So I think the regional approach is a good approach, especially when you're kind of landlocked in a lot of the areas where there just isn't real estate to do BMPs and so forth. But I'm a little concerned about the project from the standpoint that you know, our rules can change over time. In fact, we've kind of spent at least a year talking about potential rules that we will want to change. And Engineer Sobiak needs to do a little work and make sure we're making the program work with an eye towards what the rules are going to be. Because it, you know, otherwise to lock you into today's rules and then, you know, 3 years, 2 years later, we've got more strict rules. But, you know, if the plan's already approved, then, you know, we wouldn't be asking for you to update the plan to the new rules. So, Mr. Sobiak, do you have any thoughts on that? Or
President Pedersen, Manager Ziegler. There are the potential for some rule revisions forthcoming. We've been talking about revisions for a number of years here. That is a process in and of itself, takes time. So I would see the potential could potentially impact future projects. I don't see it impacting the 2024 projects at this time. But I do think there are some potential things that could be incorporated into the design with an eye towards what those potential rules might be. But typically, once a permit is approved and authorized, those are the rules that are in place, and we don't go back retroactively and say, even if the rules change, you need to update. So I think there's a way to, I'll say, soft-handedly work with the city with an eye towards those potential revisions, and see if we can accomplish something. It may be a good even sample case for what some of those revisions to the rules, how it might impact a project. We'd have a real live project to test case.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
Managers, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons cities do like regional is that it does kind of lock them in. They know what to expect. They don't have to think, oh my God, what's going to change in a year or two on us. So, I think a lot of the changes that we'd be looking at making are already being incorporated from what Mr. Seidel said about the campus, in terms of native plantings, greenscape, minimizing the urban heat island effect. So I think the bigger thing would be, what happens if in 2025 they don't do Market Boulevard and that gets pushed out to 27. But I think that's something we'd work out in the agreement between the city and the district. So I think we could work that out satisfactorily with different parties.
Any other comments or, okay,
That's it.
great. Manager Duval.
Thank you for the presentation. In general, I think it sounds really great. And I think what we've been talking about here, one of the broad concepts we've been talking about is because our whole watershed area is, 90% developed, 95% from the farmland days. So you're looking at redoing parts of the city, which seems like that opens up the opportunity, just as you've mentioned, to incorporate BNPs of our current era and potentially even looking forward. So in a general concept, it seems like this is a perfect example of how we should try and figure out how to work together. And I guess the question I would have for you, Terry, is does this tie into EHAP at all?
Yes, President Pedersen, Manager DeBell. I do think it would tie in the EHAP, at least in terms of what Manager Ziegler was saying about what changes do we see coming down the pipe. One other project that we're working closely with the city on is the North Lotus Lake Park project, which we also envision being a regional project where they would partner on it and there would be credits available for them for street projects that they are doing. So I see it tying into it, yes, maybe not directly, but I see ancillary. What we're looking at doing in North Lotus Lake Park is more of a stormwater park as opposed to a pond type of thing. So, I think that's the other benefit of, I appreciate the city being the guinea pig on this because it has required more effort on their part than had they been the fifth or sixth group through to do it. But I think we're going to see this more and more, and we're just going to have to do it. You had asked earlier what a regional plan is. And a regional plan in just a general sense is we look at a sub-watershed and can we get that same benefit and value or better benefit and value in that sub-watershed if we're to move it somewhere else within that sub-watershed outside of this site boundaries itself.
So typically we look at very site-specific projects, and if somebody's talking about moving something, we're really boxed in, literally and figuratively. And so so to me, it seems like this expands the notion where we have more flexibility and the potential is there to create something better than we had before. I mean, is that the general concept of the notion of this?
Correct.
So anyway, I think that's a great idea also. And I have a couple other quick comments. So the credit accounting, is that something, again, that's part of this regional BMP, the credit accounting that was mentioned in one of your slides here? So that's not something we currently do, is it?
Mm-mm.
So does that fit in?
President Pedersen, Manager DeBell, and that's what we would have to.
Is that the mechanism
Yes.
for tracking what we're talking about here?
Yep, and then that would be part of the agreement as to how we would track it. If it would be a GIS shapefile ledger that the city keeps and send us an annual report on, or what, we'll have to work those details out as well.
Would that be something that we would work into the rules then at some point? Or would that be a
President Pedersen, Manager DeBell, whether it be in the rules or in guidance, in our guidance document, yes, I do think it's something we should have somewhere.
So I guess another comment back to the city, as you were mentioning, it was mentioned before by Manager Koch about why not solar. You mentioned because you've worked in the current structure is giving you financial benefits, credits with the layout of what you have, and solar doesn't necessarily work in there right now, or the Excel is back at the PUC and they're potentially taking away something that you've already worked into your design. So that's a version of what we're talking about here, I think, to some extent. So you're trying to figure out if we can rejigger the way we do this so that it fits in. And yet, if you plan that in there and 2 years down the line, you change your mind about doing something, then it doesn't work on this end. So it seems like it's something we have to work at from both sides. It's not a one or the other kind of thing. Let's see, I have one other comment here, I think. So you're mentioning like rain gardens as another element in the process of the redevelopment. I'm just wondering if you heard of the notion snow gardens before? And that's we had at Minnesota Watersheds, we had a presentation of that about a week ago by, what's her name? Yeah. And they're talking about snow gardens, which is sort of the same thing, but for the opposite season, or a place where snow is designed into the parking, or not snow is designed, we have the snow, but a notion for storing the snow, which is sort of dealing with the rain when it rains. Do we have a place for snow? Has that been worked into the plans that you're kind of talking about here? Heated sidewalks?
Madam President, Manager DeVell, it's pretty common practice to use stormwater BMPs for the management of snow. While that's not, directly part of the initial plan, as far as what we're proposing, like we didn't have a slide covering it. The creation of these rain gardens and the depressions does represent an opportunity to potentially place snow for storage, but also for the snow melt that they could better treat those pollutants. It'd probably be something that we'd have to dive into the details a bit, and it'd have to do with the plantings that are chosen. A lot of the trade with the rain garden programs is that the residents want them to be aesthetically pleasing, and so I think there's a bit of a balance there between what plants they choose to have within their rain gardens and how resistant they are to the pollutants and things like salt that would be coming from the roadway if we use them in that capacity. So I will make some notes to, look into that into further detail, and I appreciate the comment.
So
I've got an add-on if you.
Sure.
If you're done.
Yeah, no, one more comment.
One of the things that they talked about in the seminar was designing for reduced salt. So if you've got a parking lot that's huge, you have to have a place to put the snow. So the worst place to put it is on the top of the hill, far from the building, where they usually end up putting it. Then when it melts, it runs across the parking lot and freezes. They had one picture they showed of the handicap parking was right next to the drain where all the water flows past and then freezes at night. And, then they have to resalt. So, a big part of it was trying to avoid the refreeze to begin with by having the snow in a lower place so the water's not running across the parking lot where it can refreeze. So, anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I guess, Madam President and Manager Ziegler, I guess my response to that would be, I think that's going to be incorporated into the civic campus. I know that they're looking at strategies to design the area and the parking to kind of maximize sunlight and mitigate the amount of salt, right? That does become a bit more difficult when we're looking at a street reconstruction project where it's a linear project. There's only so much location where that road's going to go. And unfortunately, it's probably not dictated by the exact, trying to optimize the snow melt in there. That being said, our public works team does work diligently to maintain our roadways, and they're all smart salt certified. So we are cognizant of trying to reduce our salt use throughout the city of Chanhassen. And that's, I think, all I have to say about that.
So just one last comment. I think the fact that we're meeting like this and talking about this is fabulous. Again, I think the fact that if we can figure out some collaborative ways to deal with these and have some back and forth if it's required, it seems like this is what we need. I mean, this is really part of the solution rather than just doing one-off little problems to the point of, oh, look what we did, it created another problem. If we can look at it from a bigger holistic point of view. And so this seems really like a great idea. And thank you guys all for being here.
Manager Cook.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Well, first of all, yeah, everybody know I don't give knee-jerk general reactions. I mean, we just received this tonight. Need to take a look at some of the information. Certainly you need to have our engineers sign in on this. But overall, if overall we're meeting our requirements, for quality, quantity, et cetera, I don't have a problem with it. I think we should be looking at, I've been all about this. We should have already amended our rules. Maybe this would be the impetus to amend our rules to provide for a regional program, regional BMPs or evaluations, and that's how you use your credits. You don't do it on an individual one, as long as, when you add them all up, on the regional basis, you meet your requirements. I think that's what is meant by these regional requirements. And I think that we should look at that. And, because there may be, I don't know, maybe Eden Prairie wants to do something like that. Or although they don't have, really a downtown, we're probably the only ones here that have a downtown. But, when we're talking about, this salt has been an issue, pollution has been an issue. And this all brought me back to, again, geothermal. And if we're really serious about controlling salt, one of the ways to do that is utilize geothermal and or the solar to take care of some of the snow issues that we have. And perhaps that's a way of minimizing the amount of salt that's going to be used, at least in the downtown area, on that basis. And, if we're really serious about it, it may have long-term, ecological benefits that you can't measure necessarily, in immediate dollars and cents, but they certainly are worth it on a long-term basis by not filling up our basins, and our other water recourses, et cetera, with more salt than we have to, notwithstanding smart salting. I mean, smart salting is, helps minimize it, but it doesn't solve the problem. And I think we can go further, at least in this downtown area would be a good place to have a pilot project to see if we can't incorporate geothermal, either including, heating the building, cooling the building, and even perhaps heating some of the streets on that basis with geothermal. And we have a lot of open area in Chanhassen around there where you could easily sink the wells, and or as they do in some areas, they just buried the pipe very deep, and actually they allow more than a few people to be able to use it. So I'd like that to be looked into to more. Also, I don't know, I've heard pros and cons about the green roof, in Minneapolis Public Library. I don't know if that's an alternative. I see that in the picture you have a white roof, which is certainly better than a black roof on that basis, but a solar roof would be better. And I think we need to think about, being a leader. If, I have other managers who talk about we being leaders. Well, why don't we be leaders by encouraging solar and or geothermal? And finally, I'll mention, the rain garden issue. In my view, rain gardens, we don't get much bang for the buck. That doesn't necessarily mean we don't do them, but I mentioned at one of the recent meetings, the recent studies have shown that actually wetlands and a pond, is nothing more than a mini wetland, actually contribute more greenhouse gases than what regular grass prairie, et cetera, does. And so before we go on down the path of continuing to do rain gardens, I think we should evaluate, get some scientific evaluation of, is that really, the best way to go if we're really concerned about climate and climate change? And what's driving it. So I thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. I look forward to some more information. And the last thing I'll say, and I know I've said that already, last thing I'll say is we have our rules. And if you meet the rules, they meet the rules. I've said this before, we're obligated to comply with our rules. I think having a regional plan should be an impetus for us to come up with at least an addendum to our rules that would deal with these regional plans where not every piece of property or location would have to specifically meet the rules, as long as in the aggregate that region is meeting the rules. I think that's what's meant by these regional projects. So thanks for the information. We look forward to more information, but I will echo that I think we need to get some input from our engineers on what's planned and on our comments after they've had an opportunity to think about it. So thank you. I'm finished.
Thank you, managers. I'm just going to give you a couple short, sweet things. First of all, I can't tell you how exciting it is for me that you are here, that we are all sitting here in the same room and we're going to be working together on a project. I've been hoping that this would happen for I don't know how many years. So just to actually see you all here and know that you're working with our staff, I am horribly excited because I really think we have limited dollars. We have to find ways to make things more creative, and working together is going to do nothing but really improve the projects. So I'm like super thrilled. Secondly, I think the comments we got from the managers, I think very good comments. You have a lot to go on there. Anything that we can do to kind of work to better water quality and the environment as a whole, I think you're going to see we're going to be on board with you. And again, I'd like to also thank our staff and our engineer, because this collaboration probably wouldn't have worked out if all of you wouldn't have gotten together and done your thing. So I'm all for it. Thank you so much for coming today.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'll touch base with you tomorrow.
So much.
We're on to the next item on the agenda, which is the annual report. I believe that's a draft. Manager Jeffrey.
President Pedersen, managers, annual report. I'm part of the meeting, so I should just be able to share my screen. We'll verify here. All right. And away we go. Okay. President Pedersen, managers, annual report draft form has been put into the SharePoint managers communication folder, which you were all sent a link to. Manager Cook did give me some comments. I think what I would like to do, a lot of his comments were related to the budget table and work plan. I think they would be good comments to bring to the Audit and Finance Committee to discuss how to do that. So I would recommend that. Some of the other comments I can deal directly with Mr. Cook, Manager Cook on. So with that said, I just want to quickly go through statutory obligations for the 10-year plan. I'm not going to go through the annual report. I'm not going to go through the whole annual report. Just want to talk about, so Minnesota statute's pretty vague. You got to do it. You got to have it in a timely manner. But the rules that were adopted, 8410, has a list of specific items that must be in the plan. So I'm going to go through these items and where they're located at in our plan, if they are. So the first one is the reporting requirements. That's that we must have a list of board members, officers, and the counties they represent. That's found on page 2. And then contact a person capable of answering questions. Now, the way our district is set up, data collection questions will go to Josh Maxwell. Administrative questions or accounting questions will go to Staff Bockham. Overall policy questions will come to me, so we put all of the staff on it. And then just me as a main contact down at the bottom of that. Work plan and budget for 2023, and this is the one where Manager Cook has said he would like to see a little more detail on it. Prior year expenditures, future year expenditures. So I would recommend working with the Audit and Finance Committee on that and deciding what the final table should look like. But these are found on page 5 is the assessment of the prior year work plan. Page 6 through 9 is our expenditures relative to budget. Manager Cook did point out that the expenditures exceeded the budget. I need to go back through the table and see if there was a typo or a number entered wrong. The 2024 work plan and budgets found on pages 10 through 13. Just some examples. So this budget is the budget that was adopted and this last year and submitted to the counties. There was one of the questions was, is this from the 10-year plan or from our adopted budget? It's from our adopted budget, which is what the statute or the rule says we have to have in. What is our 24 work plan and budget? Biannual reviews, they include both solicitation for professional services and a review of our capital projects. The PRAP was done in 2022. Next year, we will need to go through our projects, have a biennial review, and then end of 24 for the 25, 26 years, we will go out for our professional services. So those were not in this plan because they were not germane at this time. Our annual communications is also a requirement to be in this plan. That is included in Appendix B. One of the comments was, why are these all in appendices? For a few reasons. The primary one, because a lot of them are standalone documents and we use them for other things. So it's more convenient to be able to direct people to that appendix rather than have them go through the entire report. And a lot of the requirements are included in the main body. Most of the requirements are included in the main body of the text. Regulatory program is located in Appendix D. And what we need to is how many permits were issued, how many variances were granted or denied, and violations. So that's on Appendix D. This is one that I do need to get in there. I need to add a little portion to the annual report of where, just that timeline, the same thing that's in our monthly staff report, I think should go in there. Every city's plan and where they're at. I do want to remind managers that all cities have deferred to the district to administer their own regulatory program. So that will remain that way unless they adopt local controls that we deem to be equally protective to ours. And until they do that, they will have to defer to our rules. That's really it. That's what I want to do. Just go through that. I know you've only had a few days to look at it. April 1st is when it is due. So I would like to, like I said, get the Audit and Finance Committee together, take a look at it. And then if you have comments, feel free to just contact me directly, or if you have comments right now, I can write them down.
Pedersen, I have a comment or a question. I noticed on one of the appendices was the lake reports.
Yeah.
Lake and creek reports, but they were 2016. So I'm assuming that's going to be fixed.
Yeah, those are in the process of all being updated right now. We're waiting on some data from Steve McComas on 2 of the lakes that are in Eden Prairie. And once we get that, we'll update them all and get them in there. So those will all be through 23.
And in regards to the lake management reports too. One of the things that struck me is a lot of times when we're looking at like alum treatments or whatever, we show the lake stats and then show where the alum treatment happened and then kind of before and after.
Mhm.
And it wouldn't be that hard to put on the graphs we already have on the lake reports where our alum treatments have been and other major BMPs. Obviously, you know, if somebody does a rain garden, that's not going to have big enough effect to see it. And the smaller BMPs are similar, but the alum treatments, you get fairly almost instantaneously improvements. And then some of the other BMPs like the stormwater pond, I forget what lake that is. Is that Rice Marsh Lake?
Correct.
So something like that, if that was shown on the timeline with a vertical line so you can see what the effect has been.
President Ziegler, or President Pedersen, Manager Ziegler, excuse me. Yeah, we already have a graphic showing alum, so it wouldn't be that hard to supplant that. And yeah, if the manager would like, we could certainly throw the other major capital projects on those timelines. That would
That'd be
be
great.
That's all I,
So tell us when the last date is that you need comments back on this by. Because we can't send it to you on the 1st of April. It's due on the 1st of April. So the last date.
Stop sharing and I'm gonna. I just unmuted myself. Okay. I just left the meeting, so that's the way to do it. So the last date, you know, if we could have a full work week to incorporate comments, that would be helpful. So if it needs to get out, pull up the calendar here,
March 21st or something like that.
that would be
Okay.
great. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things I really need though is clarification for the managers as to how there can be a slew of comments, and a lot of them are stylistic or grammatical in nature, and we could be chasing after changing comments a long time. Our audience is ultimately the DNR and Bowser and the requirements that are in there. So, you know, so just keep that in mind as comments are presented.
Okay.
I think the staff have done an exceptional job on this annual report, and you know, I mean, if there are things that are blatantly wrong, then yes, we need to change those, or things that are omitted, or things that would really help clarify when projects have gone and help things. So
When I think about what these looked like back in 2017, this is a ginormous improvement. It's a big improvement. Okay.
Madam President.
Yes.
Well, you know, Administrator Jeffries already mentioned some of my comments, but you know, first of all, I'll start with the timeline. You know, this is one of the reasons why I suggested our January meeting that we have workshops scheduled for every month, and that if we don't want to have one in 1 month, we could always cancel them rather than having special meetings. I think that we should schedule a special workshop. What do we normally do it? Third Thursday or whatever it is, so that we can all get together, and we should have all of our comments submitted, I would say, in a couple of weeks, and that way we have one workshop, we can discuss the approaches. You know, nothing against staff, but this, you know, this does reflect the district, and I think we should all have an opportunity to have direct input and reach a consensus of what we want to have included and not have included. So that's comment number one. I think we should, at our next meeting, adopt a special meeting for that third Thursday or whatever date that works out, so that we'll have at least one full Board of Managers meeting prior to the due date for this report in order to, at which time that we can approve the final report for its approval. I am not in favor of sending a bunch of comments, having them done and having it sent in without we managers having formally adopted it and signed off on it and directed that it be provided. So that's item number one. Item number two, I don't know, maybe it's just me. It strikes me as being significantly different than the approach taken at last year's, not only the annual report, but also I think the annual communication on this basis. And so I always ask the question of who is our audience? And, one answer is it's Bowser because Bowser directs us to do it, but really isn't for Bowser on that basis. In my opinion, it's really for all of our constituents. And I look at this as the appropriate opportunity to have an, education and outreach piece. And so therefore, I think that we should be crafting this, I apologize. In addition, obviously meeting the requirements, but drafting it in a way that is an education piece to show our constituents what we've done, what we're planning to do, so that they can appreciate, I think, how their money is working to, basically improve the water quality and et cetera that we're tasked to do pursuant to the statute. So I'd like us all to look at it, from that perspective. What is a good way to have this be an education piece? And that leads me into next item I mentioned on my comments, and I'm going to ask Administrator Jeffrey to circulate all my comments to all the managers since we're having an open meeting. So for your consideration, but I think that even if we use appendices because they're, of some detail, I know how people generally review documents, and most of the time they're not going to go to the appendices. That said, I think that we should at least, for every appendices, every one of these areas, we should have a short summary of what the content of the appendix is. For example, if it's water quality, we can have a, very short summary or very short table that addresses this. I don't have to go through all of them, but I think all of them deserve some brief narrative in the body of the report, directing people to the appropriate appendices for more detail. I think that's generally a best practice when you're dealing with communications, materials. I'll say that I have not had an opportunity to review the appendices, but I certainly intend to do so. Let's see, I have one other item I was going to mention here. I think it would be appropriate where we have these multi-year projects, et cetera, to consider a way of including the, no pun intended, bar chart that Bar Engineering put together for the various projects that it includes in its monthly engineering report. Because it kind of shows you the progress and the various elements of the project. I think it would be something that would be worthwhile looking at incorporating it into the report, so people in a snapshot can kind of see, hey, we're 50% done now. We only started this. We're at 25% or whatever it is. I think it would be helpful. It'd be helpful for me. I truly appreciate those charts that Bar includes in every monthly report. So I think it's important that we do that. And I even mentioned that maybe you can even throw in some footnotes if you don't want to muddy up the general text too much. But I think just we need some type of summary that goes into the body, and a little more, as I mentioned, more specifics about the programs and the projects. Just having bullet items isn't, I don't know, for a lot of people, it's not very informative, although it is informative. And that's where I think some type of a narrative, in the body would be helpful. in addressing those various issues and being, specific about what what we actually accomplished, on each one. And again, that's where those the bar charts, would come into effect. But I think we need to tell people what we've done, what we're accomplished, what we're working on, what we continue to have done, because I think this really is our communication piece. Nothing against the annual communication piece, but I think this is a good opportunity for additional education. And just give me one moment, I'll see if I had anything else. Administrator Jeffrey talked about going to Audit and Finance Committee. I have this on my page 9 of my comments. In our multi-year projects, I think that's where it's important to show how much we spent, how much we're going to spend this year and what we're going to spend next. Maybe that's in one of the appendices. I don't know, because I haven't had a chance to look at any of those appendices, but I think we really want to give the people the sense of here's what we've done, here's where what we did, and here's where we're going to go to next year. And I think that's just to tie into this, when you have the 2023 final budget and work plan, there was just like some of these that make sense, you just check them off, we did these things, like administration, blah, blah, blah. But, like I said, for some of those multi-year plans, et cetera, just checking it, I don't think that's accurate in the first place. And I don't think it conveys, what we want to convey, to the public. And maybe that's where you stick in one of the bar graphs or bar charts. So that's all I have for now. I would appreciate it if you'd look at my other comments. I'll definitely have comments on the various attachments, and I would appreciate you, reviewing those as well. Oh, my final comment. I said this before, but I think it's extremely important. On page 4, again, I repeat, I don't believe that this land acknowledgement issue about the Treaty of 1851 is appropriate in our annual report. We have nothing to do with the Treaty of 1851. As far as I know, it has never been litigated. This is like saying the election was rigged. Okay? I don't believe it's important. If we're going to put a message in here, we should put a message in here about our stand about climate change, and what we're trying to do to address climate change. That's the message, that's our goal, that's our purposes, and this is what we should be addressing. I don't know that we have to take a political stand. In fact, I know we don't have to take a political stand. If you want to go to broken promises, this 1851 treaty isn't the one and the only. Go ask the Cherokee and et cetera down in Oklahoma. At least they went to court on that basis. I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I believe we're on to item 5, shallow groundwater monitoring well initiative.
Well, now I have to join the meeting again, President Pedersen. So we'll see if I've got my mic issue resolved here.
She has a comment on.
You have one further comment, Jill?
Yes,
Okay, go ahead.
I think the land acknowledgement is essential. And I think it's important that it's in there. The state is requiring a lot of education on the tribes in the school system. I know at Bowser, we're going to have opportunities to go and have training for 2 days in tribal locations. So I think this is an excellent addition, and I would like it to see it stay. That's all I had on it.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
All right, Terry.
Well, thank you for that. Bought me a little time. Share my screen. All right. President Patterson, managers, I just want to take a few moments and talk to you about a task order that that we will be bringing to you at the next meeting concerning installation of shallow groundwater monitoring wells throughout the district. So within the 10-year plan, there is, of course, the obvious number 11 goal, promote the sustainable management of groundwater resources. But as we'll talk about through this presentation, I think it also fits into many of our other goals, including data collection, sustainability, climate change, protection, management, restoration of lakes and creeks, enhancing the quality and function of wetlands, and limiting the stormwater runoff on receiving bodies. More specifically in strategies, district will continue to perform resource assessment and feasibility studies to evaluate. One example is UAA. Groundwater well study would be another example of it. Working with local government units to minimize pollution risk to groundwater. I believe President Pedersen can speak specifically to the individual resident wells, the ones that do take water from the unconsolidated aquifers and their risk that they have for it. The district will preserve and enhance natural functions of floodplain to maintain floodplain storage. We've talked in the past about the function of the soil immediately adjacent to and upstream of these areas. The district will promote strategies that minimize base flow impacts. And one of the biggest things I think that could possibly come out of this is an understanding of where are important areas for maintaining base flow in our streams, for maintaining hydrology to our wetlands, for maintaining standard lake levels. Promote infiltration where feasible, aquifer recharge. Now, it's not always going to be feasible. This well study will help us with that as well. It will also help us identify areas where infiltration rates would be too rapid and could then contribute to groundwater pollution. Use model and other available tools to design projects resilient to predicted climate change impacts. I believe it'll fit in there. And then seek to alter stormwater hydrograph through practices that reduce peak discharges. So in addition to maintaining base flow in streams, we also have the flashiness of our streams where we see a lot of our erosive forces. So what are we talking about? We aren't talking about the confined aquifers where there is a bedrock layer or something else that makes for a long-term recharge. We are talking about the unconsolidated gravel sand aquifers that are near surface, where we're talking days to years as opposed to centuries to millennia. So where our impacts today, our land use changes today, will affect tomorrow or next year. So this is just stratigraphy of Carver County. And I didn't pull Hennepin County because I just wanted to get you visually thinking about it. So all these layers down below this sand colored layer, those would be the confined, those are the older geological formations. We're just concerned about this quaternary deposit, things that were left behind by the glaciers. So if we look at just that area, we're talking about these different sand deposits. So we're looking at that area. So a lot of people don't know, but we had a well monitoring program, 70s, 80s, and 90s. We had 19 monitoring wells that were installed. 1980, only 10 remained. By 91, only 3 remained, and the program was abandoned sometime the end of the 90s, best I can figure. If you look on there, all of the wells are circled. Bluff Creek had none because it was not part of the watershed district when the monitoring program was first installed. And the 3 that have the red rectangle around it were the 3 that we were able to gather their data all the way through, at least through 97, 98. So from that, we were able to put together groundwater and piezometric contours. The piezometric contours are the dashed lines, and then the groundwater contour, which is more static level, are the solid lines that are shown on it. And from that, we can determine flow direction, recharge areas, etc. But why monitor? Why do we want to do this? I think the biggest one is the maintenance of stream-based flows. Bluff Creek as a fish IBI. The way that TMDLs are set up, you need to identify a stressor. And while I think atmospheric oxygen would be a stressor to fish, the PCA doesn't agree with that, so we had to find something else. But we know that we get down in Riley Creek and in Bluff Creek and in Purgatory, at least in the upper, to no flows. So we can't sustain fish populations there. Mitigate the opposite of it, the flashy flows, where we end up getting our big escarpments as we undercut things. Maintenance of lake levels. You know, I don't think there's a single lake that has not come to the district and voiced their concern that either their lake levels are way too high or their lake levels are way too low. So what is causing that? You know, Lotus Lake, there were 3 drift wells just south of Lotus Lake that went dry about 2007, about 2011 actually. And is there any correlation between that and lake levels we're seeing? I don't know. We don't know. Protection of wetlands, especially type 2 wetlands, those that are groundwater fed, groundwater driven. You know, we'll see a lot of places where they'll develop right up to the edge of the wetland and say, well, we maintain the hydrology, it's going to be fine. Well, maybe, or maybe that hydrology is through groundwater, and now that everything around it is paved, you have precluded that. And the only thing you're giving now is the surface water that's running into it. Identification of emergent pollutants in private wells, which, by the way, is going to become bigger and bigger. The Metro Executive Committee of MAWA, we're talking about forever chemicals now and what's going to happen with that, and are we going to have to start managing for that? Identification of areas that are suitable to infiltration or conversely are not suitable to infiltration. Provide finer resolution to the tools we already have. Gain a better understanding of how evapotranspiration and the effect of urbanization has on these unconfined aquifers. And assist with the Minnesota SEEP inventory. In 2008, the EQV issued a report stating that the DNR should undertake a SEEP inventory. We had a presentation early on in the Noble Hills property, a professor from the University of Minnesota who asked us if we would do that. So this would be helpful in that. And I see it would fit perfectly into this program. And then again, as one of the managers is fond of saying, we don't know what we don't know. There may be other uses for this that we find throughout. That's the project in a nutshell. We want to reestablish the well monitoring program within the district. We'll work with Evan and Scott to identify where these wells should be. We'll work with landowners or cities to acquire access to land to put them in. We had left over at the end of last year $100,000 in the groundwater program. That has been moved into reserve, so we would need to take a board action to move that money out of reserves back into the groundwater program. But right now, I just wanted to give you the background. Next month at our next regular meeting, we'll bring the task order to you with more detail about what it is. The task order is included in the packet if you want to look through it before that. But at this point, I would entertain any questions you have. If they're more engineering geared, I'm probably going to direct them over to Engineer Soviak. Thanks.
I have a few questions.
Madam President.
President or Manager Ziegler came to me first. Go ahead.
That's one of the advantages of sitting next to him. Anyway, the question I had was, we're going to determine the number of wells in the initial engineering, where they need to be and how many there need to be.
President Ziegler or President Pettis, give me 2 meetings and I promise I'll have it done, Pat. Yes, so that would be the first thing. We'll put together probably the pie in the sky wish list, if we had all the money, and then probably a recommended initial input of wells. So maybe we want to put in 11, but we think 5 would be better to start with, or something of that nature.
Okay, and we're calling them wells, but we're not gonna pull a lot of water, just samples, right?
Correct. It'll
And,
just be the
You
same.
know, keep an eye on the depth of the water column, if you will, within the sampling tube.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, Manager Cook, I think you're up next.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I think this is, well, based on at least on the presentation and my quick read of the task order, I think this is drilling wells is premature. I think we're going to do anything with respect to water, we should be engaging a task order to engage with evaluation, collection and evaluation of all applicable data pertaining to the groundwater in our area. I do recall attending a presentation, I believe it was of this district. I think it was in the basement of the American Legion, where there was a presentation by, I think it was somebody either with Carver County, or at least it involved information from the U.S. Geological Survey Society with lots of data, and I think that we should be engaging first of a review of existing literature, testing and information first, and then before we decide that we're going to go and punch holes and pay for ground watering. And also we should be doing an inventory of existing wells and whether or not any of those existing wells could be used for monitoring purposes. Maybe, maybe not, but you know, until we ask, we don't know. And I'm wondering if this would be a time to go to the university and talk with people at the university, see what knowledge they have. Perhaps they have some interns, et cetera, graduate students, et cetera, that could be involved in a project that we would order up to basically give us an understanding of the existing literature, et cetera, what we might or may not find out. But the bottom line is well, what are we going to, what information would we be collecting? What would we do with that information? What in possible way we're going to do that? I mean, a lot of their properties are already developed. I think the horse is out of the barn. I'm happy to, listen to experts and say why it's not, but I think we should be getting, input, and that we should engage the university or somebody like that. Contact, U.S. Geological Service, et cetera, gather information, get recommendations as to, what our goals could be, and then, is there a way to, reach our goals, whatever they may be. And if it involves, hey, we got to punch holes because we don't have sufficient data, that might be one thing. But I believe this is the case of not having a definitive program with having taken all the available current information or even past information into account before marching forward. As I've said many times before, I am against reinventing the wheel. So until we know what wheels are out there, I don't think we should be creating a new one. So I would not be in favor of this proposal, the task order as written. I would be in favor of a project that would have as its goal to come up with a recommendation of a program or something to address groundwater issues. And again, like I said before, my recollection of that, most of that presentation was there's so much clay over most of our district that, what we do on the surface is going to have little impact below, but, we'll see, and we can get, I'm sure there's already tests and information out there. We should be evaluating the information we have first before we go hunt new information. And so that will be my recommendation. And I'd like to see that type of a proposal written into a proposal. I don't know whether it's a task order, or it's a research project, or it's another project. So I'm finished. I yield back.
Thank you. Any other comments, managers?
Madam President.
Yes.
A question for Terry or Scott. And so at our one of our last annual meetings and in previous meetings now, Minnesota Watershed has done a lot of work for groundwaters or for well water outstate. And I'm just wondering if there's any databases out there, research projects that have been done regarding outstate areas that might give us a viewpoint on what we're talking about here.
President Pedersen, Manager Duval, not familiar with the outstate projects or where they're looking at. There are databases. The County Well Index exists. County Well Index is an indices of all wells that have been drilled, and it will give you the static, it'll give you the depth of the casing, the static water level at the time the well was drilled, and that is it. To my knowledge, there are no more drift wells left within the district. Eden Prairie doesn't have any, Chanhassen doesn't have any, Shorewood and Deep Haven are all private wells. And to put a pressure transducer into a private well would not work.
Now, what I was getting at is just there's a growing notion out of the metro area, and I'm just using it as an example of the wars between the farmers and the homeowners, where the farmers are basically taking away the water for the people that live there. And so there's research going on as to who's doing what and if there are solutions to dealing with it. So it's like a subset of some of the points I think that you raised. And I'm just throwing it out there as a reference point for, and I know there's been whole segments of the programs that Minnesota Watershed has done on wells, and I have to go back to my notes, but it seems like they've touched on potentially some of the areas we're talking about, or you mentioned in your bullet points, and I just mentioned it as a reference, that's all. Not saying we have to dig up what they have, but
President Pedersen, Manager Duval, I would actually defer to a guy who's done a lot of work in the Red River Valley. He might know something.
President Pedersen, Manager Duval, in terms of the work that's currently underway, I'm not super familiar with it, but I do know, and I've read some other reports and so forth, where they've looked at, regional impacts of agricultural withdrawal for irrigation and how that impacts lake levels, or how that impacts, it might not even be agricultural, it could be commercial use, right? Manufacturing. The White Bear Lake area is a prime example. The DNR's done several studies up there investigating the connection between low lake levels and aquifer withdrawal. Now, again, the geology at Forest Lake, White Bear Lake is different than the geology here. So it's not it's more of an apples and oranges comparison. But I think there is value in understanding how the surface waters in the district are connected to that superficial aquifer, that unconfined aquifer. I think of Duck Lake as a prime example. We know groundwater's impacting there somehow. We don't know the details, right? And we don't know how much. And that's where collecting data and understanding that static water level, groundwater level, and how it changes over time. I think for me, that's one of the key things is how is it changing over time? What are the impacts? Are the impacts tied to climate and changes in climate? Is it tied to changes in land use? So those are some of the questions that I know I struggle with and rattle with in my head. The other one is we are promoting a lot of infiltration, right? We want to get the water in the ground. But one of the things in doing that, we live in an area that's experiencing warmer winters, more freeze thaw cycles, more salt on the ground, gets into these basins, has the potential to impact our groundwater. So I think in these, I'll call them monitoring wells, right? These aren't drinking water wells. They're essentially empty casings that you monitor the water level in. I believe the district could at some point, either now or in the future, use them to collect samples and analyze. Are chlorides increasing? Are they staying the same? Are other pollutants being observed that we should be concerned about?
Thank you. Good answer.
Very good. Any other questions, comments? So I've a little comment to make in that I was one of a few people who did an advanced well test because I am one of 41 homes on Ridge Road. And when my results came back that I was high in dichloromethane, which causes liver cancer and is a VOC, I went into a complete shock and thought, how could this possibly be? And I've since notified most of the people on my road who are in the process of testing their wells. So to say that no one in our district is impacted by what might be happening with the groundwater, I don't believe is a very fair statement. I went about calling the EPA, the City of Shorewood, the Minnesota Department of Health, the Hennepin County Health Area, Environmental Services for Hennepin County. I can give you a list of about 10 different agencies that I called. No one cared. No one cared. I really had one call back out of all of the calls that I made. And I know that in just talking to the EPA, that there really isn't a lot of very good data for our district. So for me to actually even go about telling all the other people on my road exactly what was happening, I really didn't have a whole lot of research to rely upon. So my big takeaway from all of this is we need more data. We just do not have data. We have not really kept up on it. And for us to be able to find out what is going on with the waters within our district, this is really a prime piece. It's the research you need in order to be able to think about how the effects of things are in the future. I don't think we can put this off. I'm in favor of this.
Madam President.
Yes.
Well, I can certainly appreciate, your concern about your drinking water. I have some rough idea where you're at. I don't know. I think you have to do more than phone calls, though, if you're going to try to get any action with regard to.
I did have quite a few
Hey, wait,
emails
I'm
as well.
speaking. Do you mind?
Yes, I'm just saying to you
have this
that
problem.
there
with
is a little
interrupting
bit of a
people?
problem with us, between you and I.
Just,
Respect,
can you,
please.
have some respect, would you?
Yes. Yes, you too.
No, you're the one who didn't have the respect. Well, you want to play the recording back?
Proceed, Manager Cook.
So there's lots of problems, but the first thing that I learned on the farm 70 years ago almost, okay, was the fact that the groundwater is going to get polluted. We should be working on treated water from deep wells. That is going to be the only solution. You can go to Southwest Minnesota. You can go to the Red River Valley. Unfortunately, that's the problem. You're not going to be able to fix those issues. But before we go spend money punching holes in the ground, let's get a handle on the data that we do have. And were there any traces of chemicals in any of the wells that we did have? And we have to identify what is our goal here. I'm sorry, but we can't be just doing one thing for one person or one person's lake. We have to unify a unified approach. So all I'm saying is let's gather the data, have the data reviewed, get somebody who's an expert, like somebody from the universities, and have them come up with a plan for us on how best to address whatever issues we decide that we have that need to be addressed. So right now, you've raised a totally different issue than what was addressed by or Administrator Jeffrey. So let's have a more orderly, comprehensive plan like good scientists would come up with to evaluate our groundwater issues. But first we have to come up with what are our issues? Which ones do we want to address? Thank you. I'm finished.
Any other comments?
President Pedersen. No, I think this is a really good idea because this is how we get the information. And I think that Bar Engineering's got a diverse amount of staff with expertise on this, like Evan Christensen and others that can help us. I mean, I think it's almost in-house essentially. So I'm very much in favor of pursuing this idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I don't have my own personal well now, but I have in the first house I lived in Eden Prairie. And one of the big concerns at the time was
Excuse me, I can't hear anybody. Still can't hear.
and we need to make sure that we get the data we need.
You have a comment.
I do. Madam President, I guess to me, it seems like this fits in the broader scheme of things of looking at what we're doing in a holistic point of view. We're not just looking at the chemicals that are being spread on the lawn and trying to get it out of the local creek. We're looking at the whole picture around what we're doing to the environment that leads to all the water that we're dealing with, whether it's on the surface or it's coming up in a well or going into the aquifer. This feels like another piece of a broader mosaic that we're putting together and dealing with the local water. And we are in a spot, and probably a better spot than anybody around to be looking at the ground level, so to speak, of dealing with this. So I'm in favor of reviewing this further.
President,
Manager Crafton.
yeah, President Pedersen. The other thing I'm wondering about too, I know I've heard Joe Magner mention a couple times, and I don't know quite how we go at this, but supposedly there are organisms within the soil that actually clean up a lot of the problems. So it'd be nice if we could figure out a way to do some research on that or test something within our, I don't know how we'd go about it, but I mean, I don't know if somebody from the U would have, or anybody at Bar would have any clue on that, but I mean, that nature does have things built into it to clean stuff up. So it might be something just to look at.
Thank you, Manager Crafton. I think that brings us to the end of our agenda for tonight. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. And now we need to vote.
Seconded by Manager Crafton to adjourn. Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Ziegler,
Yes.
President Pedersen.
Yes.
We're adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.